You have successfully managed to turn back your biological clock by 18 years, is that?
I think 17.
17 years. So I'd love to hear from you, Dr. Bland. What are the things that you're doing besides taking HTB?
Making sure that those nutrients that often we've taken out of the standard American diet, these polyphenols and flavonoids, I like to get something on the range of 12 to 1,600 milligrams a day. And you can do that by making sure your diets are naturally colored with fruits and vegetables. And one of the things that we found that makes it a little easier for me is that we could sprout our Himalayan tartary buckwheat fruit seeds, which are gluten-free, and it tripled the level of these immune-active nutrients.
Sprout powder is 3 times more concentrated. That's a great point to know because, like you said, you just put a teaspoon on anything and you get your flavonoids in. Dr. Bland, I have chills that you're sitting in this chair right now. I told you earlier, but I want to repeat it for the listeners of this podcast. The reason this podcast exists, the reason Next Health exists, is basically you. You are the foundation of what we've created here. When I read your book 11 years ago, coming from allopathic medicine, it completely changed not just my personal life and my health story, but also invigorated me to change my career into following functional medicine and what you taught me, basically. And if it wasn't for you and Dr. Mark Hyman, none of this would be here right now. So I'm really honored and thankful that you're here, and I have chills that you're here in this chair.
Well, Darshan, I mean, I'm speechless. I mean, to have someone who has had your history, your experience, your depth of commitment to the field of medicine, and the number of patients that you have and will continue to provide service for, it makes everything I've been trying to do the last 40 years make sense. So thank you so much. Really appreciate your acknowledgement.
Yeah, I really, if it wasn't for functional medicine, the way I look at functional medicine is it's a brand new thought in how we should be thinking about our health and medicine in general. And you and I have talked about this. We have this allopathic sick care, disease care model that serves this purpose and is doing really, really well at what it was meant to do. But it was never really meant to reverse chronic disease, avoid chronic disease. And what you talk about all the time is feeling great, feeling like we belong in our bodies.
That's right.
Right? It was never meant to do that for us. And so we need something new, a new thought, a new model. And you created it. You literally, molded this into existence with your books and your teachings. And not only do I want to thank you, but I would love to hear kind of the genesis of the thought in your mind and how this came about, where you started to look at medicine in a different way.
So I think that the start for me has been really a consequence, like so many of our shared experiences, the people we have the privilege to meet, to be mentored by, to be informed by, to be challenged by. And I started off as a medical school professor, and I was, my life was going to be dedicated to research and development, and I recognized that a lot of the questions I was really interested in knowing were related to why do people get chronic illness. Yeah. We'd done a pretty good job in understanding the origin of a communicable disease, infectious disease, but there was a big mystery around, how you got coronary artery disease, how you got diabetes type 2, how you got autoimmune disease, how you got dementia. And actually, when I started in my academic role in 1970 as a professor, the origin at the mechanistic level of those conditions were not known at all. It was still, believe it or not, the concept of cell biology was still in its infancy. So I felt I was at the right time at the right place because I kept asking that question. And it eventually led me to an opportunity to do a sabbatical experience that I was invited to do with Dr. Linus Pauling, two-time Nobel Prize winner in Palo Alto at Stanford. And Dr. Pauling's stewardship and his mentorship of me, his office was right next to mine, so I had a lot of informal conversations with him, and he was so much more than just the vitamin C guy. He and his wife, Eva Helen, who was a remarkable force of nature in her own right, were about all sorts of freedom of ideas, of really looking how you democratize information, how you look at the body in a different way. And he developed this what he called orthomolecular medicine, utilizing things that were natural to the body that an individual needs to promote health, not just prevent disease. And that got me deeply committed, so committed I can still remember this moment. So we had spent 2 years. I moved my family down to Palo Alto. My kids at that point were fairly young, one in junior high school, the other in elementary school, and an infant son. And so we had him in the car. I was packing up my books and stuff from my office in the institute with Dr. Pauling. He came up to me and he said, well, we really enjoyed the couple of years you've been here, Jeff, and I hope we'll continue to do some collaborative work together. And then as the parting comment, he said, and Jeff, just one question. Do you think your classroom is big enough? That was the last question. And then I got in the car to drive 1,100 miles home with my family, thinking about this the whole way. What was this question all about? And by the time I got home, I recognized what he was really asking me was there a bigger calling than just my 100 students a year and doing my research? Was there something else that I should do? And so when I got home, my parents had been transferred from Southern California to watch our house in the 2 years that we were gone. My dad retired as an aerospace engineer. And so we hugged one another. We were happy to see them. And then we sat down in the living room, I remember, and I said to my parents, I said, so I made a decision on the way up, and that is I'm giving up my tenured faculty position, and I'm going to start something that is going to focus on how to teach doctors to do nutritional medicine in their practice. And you could have heard a pin drop. And my dad said, you do have a family, like you do have a mortgage. Yeah. You do have the reality, and you know nothing about business whatsoever, which is true. How you intend on doing this? And I said, I really don't know, but I have this extraordinary passion to take the resources that I've been given and see if I can manifest this. And so that was the start. And from that, that was 1982. So from 82 on, it was like, okay, we're fully in. We burned the boats. There's no going back. So here we go. So that's how it all kind of occurred.
That's incredible. From that one comment, it's so amazing to me how one sentence can change a complete trajectory of your life, And so it's, and coming from a Nobel Prize winning scientist directly to you, I mean, I could see it, that transfer of destiny from him to you that occurred there.
Yeah, that's really how I felt. I felt I was guided almost like I had been given a responsibility. And, he was such a good mentor. So for thousands of people, I mean, I was just one of many. But I think what I saw in my relationship with him, because he had so many people coming from around the world that were luminaries to visit him. And so I had the benefit of meeting many of these people and having conversations with them and kind of looking at the world from a different lens than I was trained in the pathology model. And I recognized that there was an opportunity here to do something. And then, of course, from 82 on, then I credit my wife actually in 87 saying, Jeff, you're traveling around the world, you're having all these conversations with these luminaries, you're kind of fully engaged in this field. You always talk about these remarkable people you're meeting. Maybe we should put a meeting together and you should bring, say, 30 or 40 of these people together and talk about what could the healthcare system be if you took away licensure and reimbursement, just in an idealized sense, a whiteboard discussion. So she put the meeting together. It was in Victoria, British Columbia on Vancouver Island. And about 40 of my colleagues we invited from different disciplines to come in. And it was a remarkable 3 days. I mean, we had such a blast, just free-flowing ideas. And at the end of it, people said, hey, we ought to do this again. So she put the meeting again, the same place the next year. And I had, this kind of concept of a dream on the night before the last day. And I was dreaming about what this all meant. And I came up to the concept that we're talking about function. And then I thought, well, what is function? It's physical, it's metabolic, it's cognitive, it's emotional. Maybe this is where we really should land, is understanding what it is that determines function in individuals. Because when a person talks about health, they're really talking not about the absence of disease, they're talking about the presence of function. So I came back to the group the next morning, the Sunday morning, the last day of the meeting, and I said, hey, I think we ought to, if we're going to do something around this, we ought to call it functional medicine. And everyone said, well, that's a creative idea, Jeff, but I don't think it's a good idea, because at that point in time, function in medicine had really a negative connotation. It was either geriatric rehabilitative medicine or it was psychosomatic medicine. It's a functional condition. It's all in your mind. And I said, well, that's true historically, but I've been following the literature very carefully, and I see like functional endocrinology, functional cardiology, functional radiology. Maybe we're going to see a redefinition of the term function based on what the new technology is bringing. So I suggest that we skate to where the puck is going, to use an old allegory. So everybody, probably because we sponsored the meeting, everybody said, okay, let's give it a whirl. We'll try function. So that was the birthing of the functional medicine concept. We started the Institute in 1990.
That's incredible. And you talk about the functions of the human body. It goes beyond just, like you said, musculoskeletal function, but you define like 4 critical levers of that, which are kind of the basis of everything that's kind of built on top of that. Could you just dive into those concepts a little bit more?
Yeah, thank you. Once we kind of all aggregated around this concept of function and we started to more deep dive in it, we were meeting with a kind of a steering group of the illiterati, I would call them, every week. We would have, this was before internet, and we'd have discussions about what does function mean and what are the fundamental physiological processes that give rise to function and what do we learn from the literature. And so we started having stacks of research papers that we could segment and say, okay, these are related to that function, these are related to that function. We ultimately landed on key physiological processes. And we said, well, maybe these are the places that we, if we go upstream and look at root cause, maybe this is where we ought to be talking and doing deep drilling. Out of that then, and this is probably the thing that I'm most proud of, because we eventually then were able to convert those kind of theoretic landscapes into clinical actions in the areas that we thought were able to be intervened, and we could teach to those concepts. Right. The first was gastrointestinal restoration, which we developed what we called the 4R program: remove, replace, reinoculate, repair. And I'm really proud of that algorithm because it's been adopted by literally, I don't know, thousands of different clinicians and millions of people have benefited from that. And so that was our number one. And then number two is I really got interested in how the body manages endo and exotoxins. And because we know if we didn't have a way of doing that, we would all be toxic pretty quickly and we'd poison ourselves. So we really did a deep dive into the metabolic detoxification process and really formalized that through understanding the genes of the cytochrome P450 enzyme systems and phase 2 conjugases and really started to look at hepatic detoxification and gastrointestinal function. And so that led to the second core concept, which was metabolic detoxification. That led me in 1990. I was very, very interested in bioenergetics. And I said, where does the energy of the body derive its function? And that led us into the bailiwick or the milieu of the mitochondrion. And I found out that people weren't talking about the mitochondria. It was a very esoteric cell biology concept. And I said, no, I think we need to dig deep into the mitochondria. It has its own extranuclear DNA. It has its own information system. Maybe we should really understand how the mitochondria, and this was during the time of post-viral fatigue syndrome, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, and we found that those were related to fatigue-related mitochondrial issues. We came up with what was called chronic mitochondriopathy, suggesting that maybe this was something you could intervene against. And so that led us then into the development of the third kind of concept, which was mitochondrial resuscitation using intervention. And then the fourth, which now it's still in process, and I'm quite excited about, is kind of maybe the root cause of many of the chronic illnesses, and that's a dysfunction of the immune system. And so we now are in immune rejuvenation is the fourth concept. And you put those together, now we have not only teachable concepts, but clinical practice concepts that people can actually do in their practices.
It's such a different way of thinking because I feel like when I went to medical school and I went through residency, it was really just kind of getting to the end of these processes and the disease they caused. And then what can we do to kind of patch up the broken items in your anatomy and your biology with pharmaceuticals and surgeries and things like that. And we never really thought about, where does this all kind of originate from at the root cause level? And, to your point, and I've heard you say this many times, is, there's thousands of diseases out there, but they all come down to these root biological causes, right? And so when someone is trying to avoid disease, obviously, or even reverse chronic disease, we can start working on these root biological causes. But I always say the side effect of working on these root causes is that you feel incredible again. You feel like you have your vitality back.
I think you really said it beautifully there, that the concept of self-reinforcing, because people have fairly short patience on intervention. So you have to have something that people can measure in their bodies that's producing positive results in a measurable time. I would say 2 to 3 weeks. A person needs to say that whatever they're doing is paying some dividends. So the nice thing about functional medicine interventions is people can really experience in their body what we call the felt state. They feel better, sleep better, more energy, more clear mind, less chronic kind of nagging things that keep their quality of life from being fully expressed. So we really found that this could be something could be adopted across a full range, everything from I find people doing functional medicine in the emergency room to care centers to nutritionists to it's applicable across many different theaters.
Right. And since you put together some of these original core concepts, have you added more to these core concepts, or are those still the basis of all of the functional medicine interventions?
Thank you. That's a really great question, because now functional medicine, if you think that we founded the Institute in 1990, so it's 34 or 5 years old, we really have been looking at, what's the new discoveries telling us. And I'm very proud to say that those 7 core physiological processes that we discuss in the 90s are still reigning true today. Now, we've learned a lot more about them, and we have subtypes of them, but we haven't expanded the 7 core physiological processes. So I'm very proud when I wrote the book, The Disease Delusion, and I talked about those 7 core processes, that if I was to write a new edition of the book, I would still stay with the 7 core processes, because I think it's a good launching pad.
Yeah, that is amazing. And it just goes to the rigor of your science that you put into this originally, that you really dove deep into the science to come up with those core processes. When I was saying four levers, what I was talking about is the levers that you sometimes talk about between the brain-body connection, et cetera. And so,
I think that one of the things that I think people found maybe attractive, engaging about this functional medicine model is that we introduced the concept of systems biology. And I owe Lee Hood, who was at Caltech and later went to the University of Washington and was wooed away by Gates to form an institute at the University of Washington. And then he broke away from the University of Washington to form his own Institute for Systems Biology in Seattle. But his contribution to this concept of formalizing systems thinking in medicine, I owe a great amount of appreciation and respect for. And I've been very privileged over the last 20 years to have a collegial relationship with the Institute for Systems Biology and with Dr. Hood specifically. And the concept of the fact that organs are interconnected, that we don't, the way we study them often in school is one organ at a time. We close the textbook and take a test, and then we move to the next organ as if they were suddenly, separate one from the other. And anatomically, they may be separate, but physiologically, they're all cross-talking. They're communicating. So you have the gut-brain immune connection, and you say, well, hold on just a minute. How does that work? Well, we have all these signaling molecules, and we have these receptors that are in the body that have crosstalk of information across different molecules, like hormones or peptides or cytokines or prostaglandins or leukotrienes, or I can go down the list of many, many different modulators. And each of those are crosstalking to create not just action at one organ, but they're telling the body what to do. And of course, we know that the gut, which has 70% of the immune system clustered around it, is a pretty important part of the signaling system. And one thing we know of the gut is over the course of living, a person will eat somewhere in the range, probably in the range of 10 tons of food. And that food contains information. It's not just calories. It's information that speaks to the immune system that's sitting in our gut that then communicates to the whole body. So if a person has gluten sensitivity, for instance, they may have a higher risk of dementia. Why? Because that produces an inflammatory activity of the immune system that signals through the liver that has its own immune system, the Kupffer cells, that then signals through the macrophages in the blood, that signals through the blood-brain barrier to the brain's immune system, which is the microglia. And now you then produce oxidative injury to the neurons, and now you have dementia. So by looking at these things as web-like interactions, we're able to start to piece together a much more comprehensive treatment program than just treat one organ at a time by itself. I think that's the whole theme of the functional medicine model.
Yeah, and when we look at systems biology, what I find a lot in my patients and also just in doctors in general, we tend to disconnect all the systems. And the one system we really disconnect from most of our biology is the interaction of our brain with everything that goes on underneath our neck.
Yeah.
And people don't realize the amount of connection there is. Probably the most connected system between the brain and our biology through the vagus nerve, through the immune system as well. And so we know through even just recent science that the brain is able to, even just with emotion, modulate our immune system as well. It's super interesting to me.
Well, I think you said something there that is really profound, and it's kind of deserves a moment of expansion.
Yeah, please.
So I think for years in biology and medicine, there was a very deep schism between social sciences and the physical and biological sciences. And, having grown up in the biological sciences, I have to say I carried this bias, saying, well, the social sciences are soft science. We have the hard science. We have the molecular science. And we know about the materialization of different molecules and influence different cells in different ways. So we're on the real science side, and those guys are on the kind of soft science side. But now we've completely seen the breakdown of that synthetic differentiation, because we recognize that these signals that we have in our life, love, attribution, a sense of purpose, a sense of togetherness, a feeling of worthiness, or the opposite of that, which is to feel isolated and feel unsupported, that those emotions are as powerful as any materialistic molecules in modulating the receptors that then translate themselves into how our genes perform. And so now there's no differentiation between what we considered previously the soft sciences and the hard sciences of molecules. They transmit themselves through the same exact pathways and the same regulatory systems in the body. So to me, this has opened up the opportunity to do, what some people call holistic care, but it then provides a unified understanding of how important it is, if we're going to really aspire and achieve health, that we need to bring all these components together. We need to live in a world that supports us. We need to be present in a environment that's not exposing us to toxic substances that are causing our body to be in an alarm state. We need to be able to have freedom to provide oxygen to our cells and to gain muscular energy that's necessary for powering up the mitochondria that keeps us alive. We need to eat food that is nourishing and not foods that were sent to us by some high-profit system that is to our demise. All of those things become part of the signaling system that then is picked up by our body and translates into how we physiologically respond. And right now, the dominant, I'm just saying what you know and do so well, the dominant conditions we have are inflammatory conditions. And what is inflammation? It's the body's response to danger. And it's the body saying, oh, I'm feeling in hostility. I need to fight back against danger. And danger can come from many different things, from petrochemical, forever chemicals, or it can come from people who are enraged at us, or it can come from lack of love attribution. It can come from lousy diets. All of those can create an alarm response in the body that then the total load effect of those, it's like filling a barrel eventually runs over the top, and now we start getting all these chronic conditions that can manifest as heart disease, dementia, diabetes, arthritis, all these various complaints.
Yeah, this just brings it all together. And so this kind of a unified model that it seems like the immune system is kind of at the center of this model almost, because it's really communicating with every other piece of the model to translate these signals.
I think you again, really appreciate the way you're leading me down this path, because that was my aha learning curve. I'm 79 years old now, and I've been in this field now for 50 years, actually. In fact,
you're not biologically 79.
No, I'm not. No, fortunately, according to the data, I'm 17 younger biologically.
Amazing.
But
we're going to learn how you make that happen later in the podcast.
So the theme, that has really been through this whole process of learning for me is what is the ultimate root cause of all these conditions that people are suffering from? And there are many variables that play roles in here, but I think they roll up to how the body is sensing the outside world 24/7, 365. And there's only two places that the body has the sensing of the outside world continuously, whether we're asleep or awake, and that is the nervous system and the immune system. the thing about the immune system, which is, I think, fascinating, is the immune system is in every other system in our body. You know, the heart is not in the lungs is not in the liver, but the immune system is in every system.
Everywhere.
So you say, well, why? It's because it's the signaling system that's picking up information from the outside world, and it's creating a system, even in muscles. There's an immune system in muscles. Myokines are the outcome. And so our body is picking up information translated through the immune system. And you say, well, isn't that true in the nervous system as well? And yes, it is, because the immune system and the nervous system are directly cross-talking. But the immune system has a unique personality of turning over very rapidly. And people don't know, but in a healthy individual, like you and I sitting here, presumably both healthy, every second, our body's making 1 million new immune cells, every second. And you say, whoa, gee whiz, okay, so what's that all about? It means that 1 million of them are leaving and 1 million of them are coming in. So are the ones that are coming in, are they better, worse, or the same as the one they're replacing? And every 3 months, if you do the math, we're kind of replacing our whole immune system every 3 months. So is it better, worse, or the same? And unfortunately, if you look at the data from immunological research in America, our immune systems get worse over time. And so we're less vital, more inflammaging.
Right.
And so is that inevitable? Is that like, well, that's the way it is and you can't do anything about it? And the answer is no. Immunology, the last 7 years, has now discovered that there are these routes and pathways to rejuvenate the immune system, to actually turn back that clock and to create a healthier, younger immune system that is more resilient and capable. So when I start thinking about where would I want to put my attention here at the end of my career, I want to learn more about how we actually can use the immune system to become our friend and not our enemy. And that is this whole nature real, which is occupying pretty much all of my waking hours, maybe a lot of my sleeping hours, is figuring out how to do that.
We thank you for doing that because, I mean, if we can have methodologies and protocols that we can put into place in our lives to have some control over this immuno-aging process and actually stop it or even reverse it, that could be a massive boost to our health and our longevity. And so, I mean, this is an area of science that, from my perspective in medicine, the immune system has always been a black box. Like we only even think about the immune system in 2 cases. One is fighting infection, and the other one is autoimmune disease, right? And other than that, you're really not taught much about the immune system at all. But it is, to your point, the most important system. It's everywhere in our body. And not only is it sensing the outside world, but and what a lot of people don't see or feel is it's constantly sensing the inside world as well, right?
That's exactly
and translating all those signals.
Well, you know, Darshan, I think what you said there is, again, another drop the mic statement, because I believe even medical doctors don't fully understand the pluripotentiality, the magnificent portfolio of effects that the immune system has. And just this week in Science magazine, arguably one of the top science journals in the English-speaking world, had a special issue. And it was on the non-traditional immune system. The cover of that issue is dedicated, and the article's in it.
I'm going to pick this up.
And when I read of course, for me, this was like a kid in a candy store, and it was like, oh, my word. And as I read it, I recognize they're speaking exactly to where we are focusing our attention, because the non-traditional immune system is beyond that of protection against infectious disease. It is actually recycling tissues. It's rebuilding tissues. It's a functional health system. It's not just defending solely against infection. And this is where the action point now is occurring in immunology research, is to understand how that works. How does the innate and the adaptive immune system and your T lymphocyte portfolio, how do they actually work within these organs to rejuvenate them? And so we're witnessing a fantastic revolution in how we can harness the immune system. Now, this really, I think, first arrived out of precision cancer therapy. If you think of CAR-T therapy and some of the things that are done, these miraculous new treatments using the immune system to treat cancer. And we started to learn that actually you can turn on the immune system to be able to kill a cancer cell. And so it has this capability being turned on and off if you do the right things. Now, if you turn it on too much, it can overtake the body and you can actually die by an overactive immune system. So you want a balanced response of the immune system, but that's what good diet and lifestyle does. It works within the boundaries of rejuvenating the immune system without overly stimulating the immune system. So to me, this is where the action point is: personalized immunity, and then really intervening so that an individual can roll back the age of their immune system. In fact, the biological age of our immune system has been defined as the principal best predictor of our age of death.
Right.
And so you want that immune system to be as young as possible for as long as possible. You look at centenarians, people in the blue zones, in their 100-year age that are still healthy, and they have very young immune systems by the way they've treated themselves.
Yeah. It's interesting fact for people to know, and just to double click on the science here a little bit, is that you said the immune system, we're making 1 million new cells, is it a day?
A second.
A second. 1 million new cells a second. There is no other cell type in our body that's doing that,
That's right.
And so it turns over every 3 to 4 months as well. So we have the ability to influence the production of these new cells and the cells of our immune system in a way that we'd have very little ability in any other cell type in our body.
That's right.
Right?
Exactly.
And so if we were to able to focus our scientific knowledge and attention on this particular cell, this particular system, we can make much more headway than trying to, regenerate new neurons, for example, which is extremely hard to do. And it's just somewhere where I don't know why we just haven't spent more attention on this. It's mind-blowing to me. Like, this is where we can have some direct influence with our day-to-day habits, our lifestyle, our the inputs that we're putting into our body every single day.
Well, again, I think you are introducing the people that are following this podcast to a concept that we would say seems so obvious, but it's only within the last 10 years that the research scientists in immunology have been able to find the mechanisms by which this occurs. So this is new stuff. And it's really interesting to me when I kind of follow the theme that you're developing there, that if we look at how the immune system rejuvenates itself, the process involves diet at a very significant level, because it turns out, and I'm going to give you the real numbers that best I can say from the literature, 40 to 60% of our immune system patterning, how it gets programmed, comes from our diet. 40 to 60%. So people say, well, the diet is kind of important. Yeah, it's kind of like really important because it's sending signals to our immune system. So you look at autoimmune disease. So first of all, I don't think the term autoimmune disease is an appropriate term because it suggests that a person's immune system on some day woke up to say, we don't like you anymore, and we're going to attack your body. And that never seemed very reasonable to me as to why suddenly a body would so dislike itself that it would start attacking itself, even at the level of its genetic information, to form antibodies against DNA. And like the most intimate thing is to be allergic to your DNA. That's like, whoa, that's not a good story. So I started really looking at this pretty intensively over 20 years ago. And what I came to recognize is that the immune system is not actually reacting to the body itself. It's reacting to the body that's been transformed, so it's non-self. Now, how does that happen? Let me give an example. We know that people that have type 2 diabetes or who have diabetes often get autoimmune disease. So why is that? Because their body proteins have undergone damage because of the high sugar in their body. The sugar reacts to proteins, and once it reacts with proteins, it forms a new kind of protein it's a foreigner to the body. And then the immune system says, oh, hold it, you shouldn't be here. I'm going to attack you. So you get an autoimmune response. And those are actually called advanced glycosylation end products, or AGEs. And the receptors are called the receptors of advanced glycosylated end products. So let's look at the acronym. Advanced glycosylated end products, AGE. AGE.
Exactly.
And the receptors are RAGE, so they're enraged when you have these foreign molecules. So if you have a lot of sugar in your body and it's reacting with your proteins, it's forming new molecules that your body is now going to, an immune system, find it shouldn't be there and respond to it. So if I go down the list of all the autoimmune diseases and start looking at thyroiditis, what do we know about autoimmune thyroiditis? We know it's very heavily involved with the exposure to toxins. Why? Because you form altered toxin adducts, or what are chemical reactions of petrochemical byproducts with the various proteins that are associated with thyroid function. And now your immune system says, oh, we're going to attack those foreign proteins. So it's not you, it's a non-self reaction. So how do you clean that up? You get rid of the bad stuff.
Right.
And you control blood sugar, you control the exposure to toxins, you start to improve your detoxification, you clean up your gut. And now, lo and behold, those people that have, quote, autoimmune start having their symptoms go away.
Right.
We had a patient that was so severely injured. This was a 38-year-old woman. She was a mother of four, and she had this autoimmune disease called erythromyalgia that was so severe that she couldn't actually even stand up for more than a few minutes. So when she first came into this research project that she was recruited into, she had three wishes. She wished she could stand at the kitchen counter to form a meal for her kids. She wished she could go out and plant her garden in the spring. And she wished she could go to the mall and go shopping with her kids. Those were her three magic wand wishes. She was taking a host of medications that would stop an elephant in full flight. And she was still very, very severely ill. So we got her on this whole concept, this program, to take away the bad stuff and give her the good stuff. And over time, she was, first of all, very compliant and stayed on the program very religiously, but she was also a remarkable responder. So I could see as she was coming into the office for her visits that she was improving. And at first, her husband would have to help her in to be mobile enough to get to the waiting room. And then she started being, I could watch she was having her step was more nimble. And then she basically started with her rheumatologist decreasing her medications and eventually got to where she was on virtually no medications at all. And then the gracious moment that sometimes we're fortunate to have is she came back in about 6 months later, and she wanted to give a kind of an award to the principal docs in our clinic that were servicing her. And when it was unwrapped, it was a framed photograph of her standing at the top of Mount Si, which is this very challenging hike outside of Seattle, up to the top of this peak, holding up a sign saying, "Thank you, Dr. Jack and Deanna, who were the therapists you had," and she had walked up there by herself.
That's incredible.
So these are the things, you only need a few of those in your life to keep you really motivated. So
exactly.
This is the type of thing that we're talking about, of changing the equation.
Yeah. It goes back to the beginning of the conversation where she got her function back. She could use her body. She could use her brain. It's just mind-blowing. It reminds me of, when I was a young surgeon, we would have many patients with autoimmune colitis, because this was before the biologics were out. And we did a lot of colectomies, and we subjected people to a lot of what's called stomas, where the end of their colon comes out of their skin. And they're basically using a bag for the rest of their life. And I remember thinking, why is this happening to so many people? And the answer was always, well, it's an autoimmune disease. The body's attacking the colon, and we just don't know why. And the only way to treat this is with steroids or with surgery. And then they added biologics to that equation, which saved a lot of people from surgery. But steroids and biologics just basically are meant to take your immune system out of the equation. And I just think back on the number of people that had to go through that terrible surgery without the knowledge of functional medicine. Because if we had put into our brains in medical school that the overactivation of the immune system was due to not some sort of genetic abnormality where we are just somehow becoming allergic to ourselves, to use your words, it's actually our immune system is overactive trying to fight toxins or rages or multiple other factors. And if we can eliminate those, we can dampen the immune system, get the immune system back to normal, not dampen it, normal. We would have avoided so many unnecessary surgeries.
I have goosebumps just hearing you talk about this, because this was really the motivation for me to kind of give up my tenured faculty position and start down this path. And one of the things that I recall in 1985, actually, it just hit me. was the first lecture I ever gave to doctors in a seminar on dysbiosis, leaky gut.
Yeah.
And this is before we even had the knowledge of the microbiome that we have today. And we were using simple tools like probiotics and prebiotics and starting to renourish the gut microbiome. We didn't call it the microbiome back then. We just called it dysbiosis. And I recall the criticism that we got from gastroenterology saying, come on, there's no such thing as dysbiosis. There's no such thing as leaky gut. There's no such thing as postprandial endotoxemia. That doesn't exist. And now there are thousands of articles in the traditional gastroenterological literature on this very topic. But it took quite a few years to get the paradigm to shift over. And so some of these things, if you just stay at task and you continue to do the work and you watch people respond, that's the proof of the pudding.
Absolutely. I'd love to, since you mentioned it, I'd love to dive into a little bit more about this concept of postprandial endotoxemia and leaky gut. I think it's so important. And, I appreciate you saying that this is becoming more mainstream. What I see in clinical practice when I see patients coming to us because they're just struggling so much with their gut health is, unfortunately, it's not spread as far as we would hope right now. We still have primary care doctors and even gastroenterologists saying, well, that's not a thing. All these elimination diets are just woo-woo. And unfortunately, we have to show them, we have to give them the science and re-educate many physicians. But I'd love for you to just kind of dive into the listeners of this podcast. If they're struggling with their gut health, what is postprandial endotoxemia? What is leaky gut? And how can they benefit from your protocol, the 4R protocol, to fix that? I'd love to take a little quick sidebar here and talk about that because it's so important.
Yeah, some things that are so simple can have very profound effects if you just open up your thought process. And this is one of those because the concept that we're eating all these foreign molecules, unless you're a cannibal, you're eating foods that are not the same as your body. So your digestive tract has a responsibility for breaking those down into forms that the body sees as friend and not foe. And you're also feeding the literally hundreds of different species of bacteria that are living in your intestinal tract, the so-called microbiome, that have their own personalities. And they produce their own byproducts from their metabolism. And the full weight of all of that then ultimately is on this very thin lining of our intestinal tract, the GI mucosa, which is just millimeters thick, that then has the responsibility for translating the information from friend to foe. And you would say, well, hold on just a minute. You mean that this kind of like membranous lining that's so thin is the really defense against all this toxic stuff that's going on in that 20-some feet of your digestive tract? And the answer is yes. And that is a really important part of, again, your body's functional ability to withstand the changes of travel and diet and all the things that we do in our lives. And the way that this has occurred over years is the evolution of these protective barriers, one of which is the immune system itself. As we said, 70% of the immune system being associated with that lining, the so-called mucosal-associated lymphoid tissue, or MALT. MALT. And then the other is the mucosal barriers. There's two mucus layers that are very important to protect the sensitive lining as well. And what we find is that with erosive diets and erosive lifestyles and too much drugs and too much alcohol, that it breaks down those mucus layers and changes the microbiome, the personality, into more toxic forms. And there are three kinds of bacteria that generally live in our gut. They're either symbiotes, commensals, or parasites. And it's interesting to note that in a gram of stool, in a normal person, you have more bacteria in a gram of stool than stars in the known universe.
Wow, I did not know that.
10 to the 13th bacteria per gram of stool.
Oh my gosh.
And so the majority of those in a healthy person are symbiotic and commensals, and they're friendly. And then there's only like 10 to the 4th per gram, or 10,000 of the toxic. But in a person with dysbiosis, they may have much higher numbers of the parasitic forms of these bacteria and lower levels of the friendly bacteria. Now that's what we call dysbiosis.
Got it.
And those bacteria may chew up and cause erosion to our mucosal barriers and cause irritation and then cause holes to be developed in this membranous part of our protective defense system of our gut. And that's what we call leaky gut, paracellular transport. Things leak across. And when they leak across, now they have full access to the immune system that gets overloaded.
Right.
And the immune system says, oh, my word, foreigners on board, call out the guards. And now we get this inflammatory network being produced. People used to think that was only related to gastrointestinal inflammation, like Crohn's disease, colitis, inflammatory bowel disease. But no, it actually can be systemic, because what happens is those signals go through the blood that travels from your gut to your liver through the portal blood. And now the liver has its own immune system. 10% of the liver is made up of these cells called Kupffer cells that pick up that information. And they say, oh, my word, there's foreigners on board. We better tell the whole body about that. So they send out the message to the circulating immune cells, the macrophages and neutrophils and so forth. So now you have systemic inflammation possible. And so the construct is that you need to rebuild the barriers of protection. And you start with the friendly bacteria. So there's the pre and probiotics. You start with rehealing the mucosal barrier protection, the 2 layers of mucus. And by the way, there's only one part I know of the body that has no bacteria. And that is what's called the mucin 2 layer of the mucus in your digestive tract. That is, in a healthy person, that's sterile. It's the only sterile place in your body.
Wow.
There's bacteria in some level almost everywhere else in the body. But that's the sterile protective barrier. And when that breaks down, now it exposes your immune system of your gut to foreigners.
Right.
So the rebuilding of that mucus system, and we've heard recently about a bacterium called Akkermansia mucinophila, which is a mucus metabolizing bacterium that's friendly, that's associated with good blood sugar and things. Well, how does it do that? It does by protecting the signaling of the messages that come from the gut to the immune system.
Right.
So it's one of the members of the family that we like to have a proper level of in our gut microbiome. So you rebuild the gut mucus layers, you then re-heal the gut lining so this leakiness doesn't release then stuff into the blood. And now you have a reduction of what we call dysbiosis, which then reduces then what is called postprandial, meaning after eating, endotoxemia, meaning the release of toxins into the blood because your body's barrier system now is healed and you're no longer exposing by leakiness your body to those substances. So when we first started talking about this, and as I said, my seminars in 1985 was the first time I started to introduce this concept. There was a big pushback saying, well, no, those mechanisms aren't fully proven. You're doing a lot of speculation based on animal studies and so forth and so on. That's not true any longer. In 2025, we can say with a surety these mechanisms are well understood, and it's actually factually correct.
Yeah. And what we notice in our clinics here is we do a lot of blood biomarker testing, and it's incredible to me the number of people that have markers of inflammation, HSCRP being one of them. And then we always then look to the gut first, because most of the time is going to be something in the gut that's causing the inflammation. And the gut starts in your mouth too. So there's oral cavity as well. People maybe have not visited their dentist in a while, but then going on down to the mucin layer and also the dysbiosis. And then what we measure then is what's called the serum zonulin level.
Yes.
And we find almost, I would say 80 to 90% of the time, people experiencing inflammation will have a high serum zonulin level. And that level is a marker of basically the enterocytes, the gut cells, separating from each other and causing that leakiness. And we found that to be a really good marker of not just how leaky your gut is, but also your symptoms. Because as we start treating these people with all the protocols you just mentioned, we find the zonulin level starts going down and then their symptoms go away.
Yes.
Almost universally. It's mind-blowing.
So we have a great respect for Alessio Fasano.
Right.
So I first met Dr. Fasano when he was at University of Maryland before he moved over to Harvard. And he was a heretic in his own community because he's the person who discovered zonulin. And he started talking about gluten enteropathy, and he started talking about erosive factors within our diet that could create these holes in our digestive lining. And within his own field, he was considered a heretic and was criticized. And then he started looking at psychobehavioral effects in children as it relates to leaky gut, and showing that there was effect on brain chemistry as a consequence. And his research was rigorous, and it was published in the top-tier journals like the New England Journal of Medicine. So he wasn't just a fly-by-night. He was a very solid scientist, plus he was a scholar of the first order, a student of Italian opera. He could do all the lyrics of all the various operas. But he was one of the guys that we could recognize was fearless to move beyond what was considered comfortable within his own discipline and to move outside what would have been considered, well, you don't want to say those things because that can get you in academic trouble. And he birthed this field. And we were very excited that we were able to award him with the Linus Pauling Functional Medicine Award about 15 years ago for his pioneering work. And I think now these are the kinds of people. And when I look back at the Institute for Functional Medicine at the Linus Pauling Award winners that I think we've now given up 31 of those awards over the years. I am so proud of the quality of the people that, because some of them, Gerald Reven, for instance, who was the developer of the concept of metabolic syndrome and Syndrome X, endocrinologist from Stanford, and I could go down the list. These are the people who really have created the heavy lifting, the science that underpins the functional medicine model.
Yeah, it's incredible science, and thank God for people that started to look at why we have disease versus how do we just treat the disease.
Exactly.
Is what it all comes down to. So going back to the gut and inflammation and getting the gut healed to reduce inflammation, we also have the natural cycle of life, which is just, our immune system ages as we get older, right? So you've eliminated, say you've done everything you can. You've fixed your gut, you've eliminated inflammation, your HSCRP levels are 0, you're feeling great, but the immune system still ages, right? And so how can someone slow or stop the immune system aging? What are some things that we can do? And this is where you've dedicated kind of like this part of your life now, so defining this science. So maybe you could just kind of give us a quick primer on scientifically, what is immunosenescence, immune aging, and then how do we affect that process?
Yeah, thank you. So what I'm going to speak to in the next few minutes is really new stuff.
Right.
And as I said, this issue of Science Magazine just last week is really bringing this up to the broader audience. So I'm really going to be speaking about kind of cutting edge information. So how is it that the immune system ages? Why is it? Is it just like, okay, well, we get older and the immune system gets older, that's how it is. But how? Why? Well, it turns out that the way that it's aging is through the imprinting of immune cell genes with certain messages that alter how the immune system functions. And that's associated with a condition that we often call inflammaging and inflammatory states of our immune system over age. And what would actually cause that to happen? Why would the immune system suddenly start changing its genetic expression? Right. It's because of epigenetic modulation of the immune system. This is an new breakthrough. So epigenetic means above the genes. So we have the genetic code. So that would be like the hardware of your computer. And then we have how the hardware is operated by the software, and that's the epigenome. And the epigenome regulates then how your genes are going to be expressed. Well, the immune system, because it's turning over so rapidly, like we talked about earlier, it's one of the most dynamic cell types in our body, it is getting information from what we're doing that epigenetically modifies or tags the immune system, starting really at where the immune system ultimately emerges, which is the so-called hematopoietic system, which is in the bone marrow. That's where all of our immune system originally started, and our red blood cells too, is in the bone marrow. And so if you are exposed to stuff and that stuff means things that would cause your body to be in an alarm state, it will change how those cells come out of your bone marrow and go into various places like the thymus gland, which is where they get processed into various types of immune cells. And that puts different marks on them. These are the epigenetic marks. And those epigenetic marks, in the course of living, then change the way that the genes in your immune system, the genes stay the same, but the way they're expressed changes.
Right.
And it moves it into what we call immunosenescence over time, because your body is trying to respond to a less than perfect environment that we're all living in. So does that mean that everybody's immune system ages at the same rate? Of course not. Some people's immune systems age rather slowly. As I mentioned earlier, like people in the blue zones, when you look at the aging of their immune system, it's much slower. Why? Because it changes the epigenetic marks by the way they've been living.
Right.
They live with joy. They live with community. They live with some red wine. They live with polyphenol-rich foods. They live with exercise.
Right.
And all of those signals then change the epigenetic modeling of their immune cells, which are turning over very rapidly like they are in all of us. And so they then don't pick up the signals of alarm, and they don't have immunosenescence, aging in the immune system at the same rate. So what happens if you have a person who has got a lot of things going the wrong way? They're eating ultra-processed foods. They're under extraordinary stress. They feel no love and attribution of their life. They live in a toxic environment, maybe from heavy metals, or maybe from a combination of that and petrochemical hydrocarbons or forever chemicals. And all of those things then start putting a signal into the immune system that causes its epigenetic modeling to change. And we measure this, by the way. We just finished a clinical trial. We published it last November. It was a small pilot trial in which we were able to show, by intervening with the appropriate kind of things that remodel the epigenome of the immune system, that we were able to slow the rate of immune aging by 47% in 90 days.
Wow.
47% reduction in the rate of immune aging.
47%.
In 90 days. That was published in what we consider a top flight journal last November. By the way, that study was so encouraging to us that we're now engaged, and will have finished by the end of the year, the largest clinical trial I think ever been done anywhere in the world on a single food's influence on immune aging. It's 850 people in a double-blind, placebo-randomized controlled trial. And the result of that trial, I think, is going to be frame-shifting in the way people think about diet influencing the immune system. But what we have learned now, and I'm very proud to say that we're part of this kind of community of nutrition immunologists that are really starting to explore the mechanism by intervening with specific types of foods that you can remodel the epigenome of the immune system and roll back, we call it immunorejuvenation, roll back the age of the immune system. And so what are those things in the diet that do that? Well, it turns out that a family of nutrients that people have discounted and marginalized, which are the polyphenols and flavonoids, of which there are thousands of different members of that family in whole foods. They often are the coloring part of fruits and vegetables. That those, which we have trivialized in nutrition and don't even teach much about them in nutrition education, they have really important roles, we have found, in modulating how our immune system is epigenetically tagged. And they actually change the process, and I could get into the gobbledygook or the enzymology and so forth. I'll just say they change the enzymatic process starting right at the bone marrow all the way through thymus involution and ultimately the production of our final immune portfolio of cells, and how they're going to be epigenetically modified in how the genes in those cells are expressed, which means controlling their function. So this is like relearning. This is Back to the Future. This, if I can talk about this, is relearning what culture have told us for centuries if we only had learned it earlier. And so that led us then into the serendipity of a discovery which I never thought in my life I would be involved with, of an ancient food, 3,500-year-old food that I was coincidentally informed about, which I knew nothing about before learning about it, called Himalayan tartary buckwheat.
Right.
And so tartary is the tartan district of China up against the Himalayan foothills. And it turns out that this is a 3,500-year-old food, one of the oldest husbanded foods in the world. And it has a rich history of being associated with immune defense. As in fact, in the Yellow Emperor's Handbook of Chinese Medicine, it is considered a therapeutic medicinal food. And why is it? Because now we have found it has over 120 different members of the polyphenol and flavonoid family, all of which have unique effects upon immune epigenetic regulation. It's probably the richest food that we're aware of in immune regulation processes.
That's incredible.
So we've been studying the mechanism by which that occurs, but it links back to historically what people have known about this food. There are hundreds of studies on this food in the Asian literature.
Wow.
But for some reason, and I still don't fully understand why, it has not been picked up in the Western world.
Yeah.
So now we got so sucked into this, now we have the first regenerative and organically certified Himalayan tartary buckwheat farms in upstate New York. And I've got my hands in the soil. We have soil scientists working for us in regeneration of the soil. We're growing the Himalayan tartary buckwheat, and we're bringing it to the United States for the first time. And it was that we then studied in our pilot trial that was able to reverse then the rate of immune aging by 47% in people that took a controlled amount of it every day. So I think that we're on to something here. We're back to the future, learning how things that were historic work through the science of nutrition and immunology.
Do you have any ideas, Dr. Bland, about I'm always so curious about evolutionarily why things happened, right? Do you have any theories on that? Like, why did we evolve so that certain plant compounds can modify our genetics? I mean, there's no drugs that can do that, right? I mean, you talk about CRISPR technology. We're just trying to figure this out right now. But now we have plant compounds that can modify our genetics. How did that happen just in the history of human evolution?
So I think that's a really, really important question. So I want to make sure that the viewers, listeners don't mistake what I'm trying to say. We're not changing the genetic code. The code stays the same. What changes is the software that regulates how the code is read in our body, how genes are expressed. And that's the epigenetic process. So when you ask, well, why would we have these two systems? Why do we have the genetic code and then we have the epigenetic code? It's because I think the genetic code is like the coarse tuning knob. It takes millennia to change the genetic code by selective mutational
evolution,
process of evolution. But we need to have some kind of fine control over what could happen as a consequence of things that occur in a shorter period of time. So in the intelligence of our body, we have this epigenetic control mechanism that's the ability to respond quickly to changes. And so the nice thing about the epigenetic code is it can be put on and taken off. It's reversible. Whereas the genetic code, once it changes, it's pretty much hardwired. So the question is then, why does our epigenetic code, why is it influenced by our diet? Because plants have their own immune system. They have their own ability to defend against infection, against hostility. It's called abiotic stress, like temperature and drought and toxic chemicals like aluminum in the soil. They have genes that protect them, and so that's their immune system, but their immune system is tied up in making these compounds, these plant compounds that serve like white blood cells in the plant. They serve as immune protecting agents. And so when we then eat those plants, which historically that's been part of the human diet going way back, those molecules then send a signal epigenetically to our genes and tell us either good stories or bad stories, depending on what they are. And so we evolved this relationship with our foods depending on the regions in which our genes were nurtured over time. And, it was only more recently that we travel around the world as cultures on jets. But, people were generally more isolated. And so the foods that they had access to then created signals to their genes that then pattern those genes epigenetically to respond to those environments. So you say, well, why are certain people, certain ethnicities more gluten sensitive than others? Why do some people have fava bean sensitivities and others don't? It depended on the cultures that they were raised in and how those genes were influenced by their environment. So now we're kind of a sandpile genes. We move around and we have all these different mixtures of our epigenetics, and so people might travel today, be here, and tomorrow they could be in an entirely different country eating a different set of foods. So what we have is this kind of plasticity of our epigenome that is robustly tied to our microbiome, tied to our immune system functional adaptation and resilience. And what you find with people who have immune problems, could be everything from allergies to inflammation, that their immune systems are not resilient to those environments. And so that's why we put them on diets that will relax their immune system, re-epigenetically program it to be more resilient, and now we roll back their age of their immune system to a lower inflammatory state. So that's the new aha, I think, of that's why we formed the company Big Bold Health, because we thought this was a fairly bold idea. It's a kind of a big new concept, and that's really what we're focusing on.
Yeah, it is a big, bold idea to use a plant compound to 47% reduction of immune aging, and it's I can't wait for the study to come out.
I think the really important thing, Darshan, for our learning is that our body works as an orchestra. It doesn't work off just one instrument, not just the best first violinist in the orchestra. It needs the full orchestra, the brass, percussion, woodwinds, and strings, all to play together. So when we eat an orchestra. We eat, in the case of Himalayan tartary buckwheat, we have found it has over 120 different immune active nutrients. Now, you could say, well, why would the plant go to such trouble to make all those? Does it have nothing better to do? It makes them all because that is the orchestration that plays the suite of immune protection in the best way. It's not just having the best first violinist.
Right.
So people say, well, don't I just want to take more quercetin? Or don't I just want to take more luteolin? Or don't I just want to take more hesperidin? Or don't I want to just take more vitamin C? Well, all of those are important, but it's the suite that our diet provides us that gives rise to the orchestration of the immune system. And that's what we're learning. And that's why the complex nature of foods and why we're doing this organic agriculture and this regenerative farming to produce and why we're re-nourishing the soil microbiome so that it speaks to the plant in the way to produce the best orchestra of products that when we eat, we get the full advantage. And that through line, if you think of the planet has an immune system, the soil microbiome has an immune system. The plant has an immune system. The animals that eat the plant, and now we who eat those animals, all of those are tied together through this through line.
Right. It makes evolutionary sense to me that we all do come from one massive biological system working together since the beginning of time. And it's interesting to me that this plant, Himalayan tartary buckwheat, HTB for short, evolved in such a harsh environment. And so, to me, that makes sense that it needed to create all these immune defending compounds, right? And so now we get to benefit from that by the same compounds being able to modulate our immune expression through our genetics.
And I think you've also suggested that when you grow plants in a little bit more hostile environment, their genes will turn on those protective substances. So this is a differentiation between organic foods and foods that are, grown with conventional pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers that don't have to generate any of their protective compounds. And so when you start analyzing the difference of an organic broccoli to a commercially grown broccoli, and you look at the phytochemicals, you'll find they're vastly different. The actual vitamins and minerals are pretty similar. They're not exactly the same, but there's a vast difference in these immune protective compounds when you allow nature to do what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, and you test for these compounds between organic versus non-organic versus regenerative farming, and you can see a difference in the types of compounds and their levels, the amount,
Absolutely. And in fact, I think we're now doing more analytics on every batch of Himalayan tartary buckwheat we grow now gets studied by deep analytics to understand what's the reproducibility of these portfolio of these nutrients. Does it different based on where we grow, the soils that we're growing it in, the way we inoculate the soils with friendly bacteria and mycorrhiza? How does that all influence the eventual composition? So we're developing a portfolio of information about how nature gives us this gift that I don't believe has been probably fully understood until the work that we're doing now.
Well, hopefully you're publishing some of that as well, so
We are.
other farmers can learn from that, because imagine if everything was grown that way. It could completely change the destiny of how nutrition affects us. Because right now, most of our food comes from over-farm soil, from foods that have been transported hundreds of miles and kept in large storage units, cooling storage units, and the nutrient density of our food is nothing like it used to be.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And you can actually taste it in the flavors of the foods, which, flavors are related to the personality of the ingredients within the food. And people would say, well, do those flavoring molecules have any influence on biological function?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes. It's all part of the portfolio of information. When we eat, we're eating information.
Yes.
We're not just eating calories and nutrients. We're eating information that patterns our genes as to how they're going to perform for us after we eat those foods.
Right. It's such a key point. I think for every listener of the podcast to understand that what you are putting into your system through the foods you eat, through the toxins you're exposed to, through the amount of exposure to the environment that you get through sunlight, et cetera, it's so critical. And even though it's hard to really see it, we can tell at a genetic level through epigenetics that it has a massive influence on the destiny of our health, basically.
Yeah, I think for me, when I really got this in full, was this small clinical trial that I mentioned that we published last November, in which we showed that people who had consumed the Himalayan tartary buckwheat flavonoids had had the reduction in their rate of immune aging by 47%, that when we looked at specific genes that were within their immune genome, we found that some of them varied in the way they were expressing by 1,200%.
1,200%.
We were able to turn on and turn off the gene expression patterns by just eating by 1,200%. So it's like, whoa, our food has a lot more impact on how we look, act, and feel than we previously understood at the cellular level.
Yeah. Is HTB also a good form of food or supplement that people can use if they have an autoimmune disease, for example? Would that also be beneficial for them?
Yeah, because of these effects, we're talking about immune function resilience.
Right.
And so if a person has an imbalanced immune system, we don't want to just boost it, because we could boost the imbalance. What we want to do is repattern it so that it actually regains its resilience. And so we've had really, really a lot of personal testimonies and clinical responses favorable in people that have kind of preclinical autoimmune disease, where they're starting down that pathway to be allergic to themselves, so to speak. And so I think that this concept that we can reconstruct our immune portfolio by sending the right signals epigenetically to our immune cells, starting way back in the bone marrow, the hematopoietic stem cells, as they're called, that is it's part of our options as to how we want to live.
It's an incredible new option that we have. And, when you say preclinical autoimmune disease, I can think back even just last week, seeing the laboratory results of a patient of ours that has antithyroid antibodies developing out of nowhere. And it's just, there's so many people that have a little bit of ANA positivity or rheumatoid factor. And you're like, what do we do? Like, do we send them to a rheumatologist now? The rheumatologist is going to say, I have nothing for you except for steroids and some biologics. And this is a brand new tool in the tool shed, I would think.
Yeah, and I think you've just said another thing that's, again really profound. So I have an association with a rheumatology group up in Seattle, and we've been doing some collaborative work together. And one of the members of that group did a study looking at the effect of the TNF-alpha blocking agents in people with biologics on SLE, systemic lupus erythematosus, and rheumatoid arthritis. And he made a very, very remarkable discovery. and this has been published, he found that the response that people had to those drugs, because as you know, in 100 patients with the proper diagnosis that are treated with the same drug, only about 40% of those patients will have a positive clinical outcome from a biologic. So 60% will not. And so what he found is that the response rate to the drug in people with the diagnosis of autoimmune disease was related to their heart rate variability.
Interesting.
Now, what is heart rate variability? It's a surrogate measure for the activity of your parasympathetic nervous system. And where does your parasympathetic nervous system get its messaging? From the vagus nerve. Vagus means the wandering nerve, this long nerve that goes from your cranial area all the way down through your whole digestive system into the lower extremities of your body. So it's picking up all that information. It's picking up information from your gut. It's picking information up from your psychosocial environment, stress. And so if a person has a low HRV, and you know, there are various wearable devices that measure HRV, I'm wearing one of them, actually I'm wearing two of them, that those HRV measurements, heart rate variability, are surrogate markers for your heart rate variability. So if you have for your parasympathetic tone. So if you have a high HRV, then you have a high parasympathetic tone, which means you're in a relaxant state. A relaxant state then makes that person much more responsive to a TNF-alpha blocking drug.
So interesting.
Now, what does it really mean? It means it's tuning up your immune system. It makes the need for a drug lower. And so rather than just think of this as a device to change the dose response to TNF-alpha blocking agents, we think of this meaning that your stress factors and your parasympathetic tone will tell you how your immune system may be responding epigenetically and putting you in a state of inflammation. So all this goes together, as you do so wonderfully in your clinics, to put together this picture, this assembly of all these factors that then give rise to personalized intervention to get a person away from the need for pharmaceuticals that are in the terminal state of the condition.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the core treatment modalities that we use is this idea of modulating your HRV through whether it be breath work or, we have cold, hot contrast therapy, anything that you can do that actually gets you to switch between sympathetic and parasympathetic is going to build up over time to where you'll modulate your immune system. And also, it has tremendous benefits beyond even that. And so to us as a core treatment modality and just a core skill that we give people is this ability to switch between parasympathetic and sympathetic.
So again, I want to just honor what you're doing, because this is expanding medicine to where it needs to be. If we're really going to talk about wellness medicine, we need to get away from saying, well, we're just going to wait till you need a TNF-alpha blocking agent and then we'll do something. What we're really saying is actually these things that we do that used to be considered soft are actually hard. They're really important things that are sending the right signals actually to repattern your body's processes in this dynamic system, the immune system, that's turning over every 90 days. So let's send the right signals to repattern so you rejuvenate your immune system. We can turn back the biological clock. That is really powerful new concept.
Really is. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. You have successfully managed to turn back your biological clock by 18 years. Is that what?
I think 17.
17 years. So I'd love to hear from you, Dr. Bland. What are the things that you're doing besides taking HTB? And what are some of your habits that you're using?
Well, I think that, first of all, I would say I have the pleasure of being in a very loving environment. And I have a marvelous family. I've got marvelous grandkids. And I have marvelous friends, you being one of them.
Oh, thank you.
And I would never want to diminish the importance of those signals that are picked up by my body and translate them into my function. So that's number one. Number two is, I've elected to live in a really a tree hugger's paradise. I live on Bainbridge Island. I'm near Seattle. So we're out-of-doors people. We're hikers and we're we're people that enjoy the outdoors, and so I have a rewilding. I live right next to what's called the Grand Forest, which is a first growth forest that allows really nature to be present just out my back door. So that's a luxury. Number three, I really believe that sleep is a powerful benefit, not just for restoration, but for recreation. I think when I look back over my years as a professional with my 6 million miles of travel and all the planes I've been on and all the hotels I've stayed in and so forth, that the concept of sleep hygiene has been really important because my best ideas actually have come up in sleep. I think that's my most creative times. So I really, now that I'm 79, I really make sure that I'm prioritizing sleep appropriately, and this kind of 7 hours target I have of quality sleep is an objective. Next is trying to do a best job I can to stay away from the inclination to eat by convenience, because eat by convenience is very easy because we've got all these ways that you can do hand-to-mouth eating, particularly when you're traveling a lot. And so I've learned how to manage through selective time-restricted eating. I don't have to eat all the time, and I try to be very cautious about when I eat. I'm eating things I really want to send the right signal to my body. And fortunately, as a consequence of that, that's kind of regulated my blood sugar very well. So I don't go into hypoglycemia. I don't feel like I need to kind of eat hand to mouth. It's a little bit like an interesting paradox. The more you eat, the more you can get hungry.
Right.
The more you condition your appetite, the less you feel like you need to eat, and the less hungry you are. It's a feedback process. So I'm on a time-restricted kind of feeding program, trying to not eat anything significantly before noon, and then try to condense my eating into 6 hours a day from noon to 6 or 7 o'clock at night. And then, of course, there's this old thing. I learned this from my Oura Ring. Alcohol is not your best friend, and so limited amounts of alcohol in special occasions, but it will really throw your sleep cycling off. So you learn a lot by your feedback. And I wore a lot of CGMs and looking at continuous glucose monitoring. I found out those foods that really stabilize my blood sugar and those foods that don't. And I think that's very personalized because you can't just say all foods have the same effect on blood sugar in all people. And some people, a food that you might consider like, oh, gee, that's going to cause your blood sugar to rise, and that person that doesn't. And another food that you thought was going to really flatten your blood sugar might cause big blood sugar spikes. So I've kind of personalized my diet based upon those personal responses. And I recognize I have the advantage of having been in this field for a lot of years, so I can do these studies on myself. And then I think lastly is making sure that those nutrients that often we've taken out of the standard American diet, these polyphenols and flavonoids, I like to get something on the range of 12 to 1,600 milligrams a day. And you can do that by making sure your diets are naturally colored with fruits and vegetables. And I'm not against grains. Fortunately, I'm not gluten intolerant, so modest amounts of grains. I try to stay away from gluten-containing foods, but basically trying to eat variety in moderation, but making sure that I'm getting my 1,200 to 600 milligrams a day. And that one of the things that we found and makes it a little easier for me is that we, in our Big Bull Health discoveries, found that we could sprout our Himalayan tartary buckwheat fruit seeds, which are gluten-free, and it tripled the level of these immune-active nutrients. And so it used to be that in order to get 1,200 milligrams, I'd have to eat something like a quarter pound of the flour. Now it's 2 teaspoons of the sprout powder give me about 1,000 milligrams of these immune active. So we're really on the bandwagon to say, for people, if they want an easy way to get these immune active rejuvenating compounds, the sprout powder, the Himalayan tartary buckwheat sprout powder is a very simple way because you can put it in smoothies, on salad dressings, you can put it in soups, you can put it on granola. It can be used a million ways, and it just takes 2 teaspoons to deliver about 1,000 milligrams. So that's another part of my daily regime.
Yeah, no, that's so powerful. I didn't realize the sprout powder is 3 times more concentrated. That's a great point to know, because like you said, you just put a teaspoon on anything, and
That's exactly
you get
right.
you get your flavonoids in. I love that.
And there's an interesting, nature gives you gifts if you're willing to do the heavy lifting. She will give you some of her secrets, and so we knew that when you put when plants make a lot of flavonoids, it imparts a flavoring to it, and generally bitter. So we've always said bitter is better. But a lot of people don't like bitter. And so the flower, for some people, because it has a slight bitterness to it, is kind of off-putting. And although the pancakes are awfully good, not everybody's a pancake person. So when we worked on this sprouting technology and we tripled the level of these immune-active polyphenols, we thought, oh, this is going to be really bitter, because now we got 3 times the amount of these bioactive compounds. And so when we tasted it for this first time, it blew us away, because it was not bitter at all. It was nutty. Wow. And then I said, how in the world did we end up with a non-bitter flavor, something that's 2 to 3 times the level of the bittering compounds in it? And I think we discovered why. It turns out that when you sprout this Himalayan tartary buckwheat seed, that you enhance the level of many of the different flavonoids. One of them that goes up 2,000% is a compound called homoeryodictyol. Homoeryodictyol is actually found in the herb Yerba Santa. That's a traditional medicinal used in the Southwest by Native Americans for anti-inflammation. Well, it turns out that homoeryodictyol has another benefit. It has actually been approved by the FDA under GRAS, generally regarded as safe, to be used as a food additive as an anti-bittering agent. So when we sprout Himalayan tartary buckwheat, it makes its own anti-bittering compound, which is just like blew me away. That's how nature will give you these
Gift
secrets.
from nature, right?
Exactly.
It's almost like nature wanted us to have this.
That's exactly. It's amazing.
I love it. You mentioned a few times your Oura Ring, your watch, and this. You wore the CGM, and you were doing these kind of mini experiments on yourself. And I'm a huge believer in N of 1 mini experiments on yourself, and using data to really personalize from everything from the things you eat to your exercise routine to how much you're relaxing. And it seems like this is the future to me, that we have an incredible amount of data. And unfortunately, at this moment in time, and I think it's coming soon, we'll have AI being able to take this data from the cloud and tell us what we need to be doing. But to me, it's really interesting to learn about myself and kind of change my habits and my routines and my diet, and see how that affects my data. And I just am still so surprised with in our field, we see a massive prevalence of people having things like rings and watches, but I would still think about 80% of the people out there don't use these devices.
Yeah, it's very surprising to me as well, but I recognize, and having been in this field now for 50 years, that adoption takes a while.
It does, yes.
And I think what you said is really the key point, that the information is only as good as the ability of a person to understand it. So now we're getting into cloud-based algorithms, and where you can get real-time data information through AI, and it can help interpolate for a person who's not a geek like I am. They can get this information back in a intelligible way that they can actually incorporate into their lives. It's not just information for information's sake. And I think we are at a revolutionary point. If you think of the fact that we as a human being are the first generation that has access to 24/7, 365 information about our body. We've never had that. You used to say, I'll go to my doctor and maybe I'll have a blood test one time a year and they'll measure a few things and they'll tell me if I'm sick or not. But we've never had wellness assessing information available real time, all the time. And that now is a cultural shift that will make us all more informed about the most precious thing we own, which is our genes. I call them our book of life. How does our book of life get orchestrated? How does it get read? We'd like our book of life to be a love story, to be full of this joyous life that produces all these remarkable experiences for the century of good living that we might enjoy on this planet. We don't want it to be a Greek tragedy. And so the way that you do that is by taking the information, because both the Greek tragedy and the love stories are in all of our genes. Both those stories
Those are
exist.
both in there. You're
So
right.
which ones do we want to read?
Right.
Well, and so how do we read them? We understand something about the stories that are there, and we put bookmarks on the parts of the book that we want to read, and then we put do not read marks on the part we don't want to read. That has to do with information, intelligent decisions, and that's what the functional medicine movement is all about. Having the intelligence of understanding as to how you use your gift, your book of life, to get 100 years or more of high-level living. And you do that by recognizing your facet on the diamond of life. There's no one that's ever been like you identically or will be identical to you. It's you. And it's the most precious thing you own, to treat it with respect and to get the maximum benefit out of it, because it'll treat you in respect in return.
Right. This is a beautiful analogy. The book of life, in bookmarking it by your habits every single day. You're telling your body what to read and what not to read.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful. I'm curious. You've been at the tip of the spear of the science of this movement for so long, decades now, and you've curated the best scientists and thought leaders and doctors in rooms many times every year. I've been to your conferences. I'm curious if you are surprised or you saw all this coming of where we are right now with functional medicine, just health in general, and just the level of how, wearables and the technology. Does this surprise you? And what are some things that you are really looking forward to in the future here in the next few years?
Yeah. So Ray Kurzweil, this whole concept about paradigm shifting, cultural transformations, and as the population of the world increases, we need more transformative ways of seeing how we can redefine human species to be living in peace and harmony and in health. And the old models where you're all spread out across the large land masses, when you're all densely packed together in major cities, you need different skill sets in order to realize the full potential of the human being. So I think we're trying to work that out right now. I think we have a global kind of challenge as to how, when we have industrialized and urbanized our population, that we can still keep the best of humans that are present within our genes. And I'm optimistic about that. I think the transformation will be not in my generation, the old dudes. It's going to be in my grandchildren's generation, and we have a big legacy of important opportunity to give them the opportunities to create the new solutions based upon the technologies that we are emerging, because they're technologies that can maybe scale to make some of the things that were either too expensive or too complicated become more readily available. Until you get it down to the masses, you're only selectively going to be influencing a very small percentage of the population. So I think we're seeing ways to expand and scale these opportunities to greater applicabilities, probably in people that most need it. And I'm encouraged that can happen through these economies. I'm also concerned that these things could be turned in ways that could be manipulative of people and put people against one another. So I think it's for stewardship of these technologies that really will define how we as a global society move into what I hope will be planetary health. And when I say planetary health, I mean it's a healthy planet and healthy animals and people and plants and organisms that live on it. So the theme to me right now is to have enough positive experiences that people have when they start to gain mastery of their own bodies, that they become ambassadors to others. Because I think the infection of a multiplicative game of 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, that old adage of, you probably know this parable of the pauper that went to the king and said, I ask only one thing, sir, and that is that you double on each square of a checkerboard, you double the amount of seeds of grain that I would bequeath. And the king said, well, that's a silly request. Of course, that's easily done. But if you do 2 to the 64th, you end up owning the whole kingdom.
Exactly.
And so I think that's what I'm hopeful will happen with this field as we start gaining positive experiences. People speak to one another. They look by the proof of the pudding and say, well, that person is seeming like they're performing really well and having a good life. Maybe I ought to be doing some of that as well. So I think what you're doing with your Next Health is absolutely part of the tip of that spear to really create the environment that allows individuals to see the proof of the pudding, which is how do people come out of this once they spend time investing in themselves.
It's so critical. And one of the things that we see all the time here is people come into one of our clinics and they start feeling better. And then they bring their friends because they can't help but shout from the rooftops how they're feeling better, how not just avoiding disease, because you don't really feel avoidance of disease.
Right.
But you do feel that ability to wake up every single morning wanting to take on the day. And you do feel the ability to keep weight off. You do feel the ability to, win at a sporting event that you never even thought you'd be competing in.
Yes.
Those are things you feel. And when you feel those, when you feel that way, you want your friends and your family to come along with you. And people bring their friends in. And we develop a kind of a community around just feeling great. And I think that's what's going to really move the needle here for people.
I absolutely agree. We call it, because of our immune focus, co-immunity.
I love that.
Co-immunity, right? We want everybody to be part of the community.
Right. Exactly. Well, I personally am so excited that you decided to just get back into it again with Big Bold Health. And really, I look at all the aspects of functional medicine, and there's always ways to affect all the different aspects of functional medicine that you put out there, the protocols. How do you fix your gut health? How do you improve mitochondrial energy production? But the immune system has always been kind of a black box since I went to medical school to now. And it's just so exciting and so incredibly beneficial for all of us that you decided to double down in this area and give us tools like Himalayan tartary buckwheat, HTB, and some of these other thoughts around slowing the immune system's aging process by 47%. And that's a massive change that we now can all benefit from.
Yeah.
And I really just thank you for putting this together again.
Well, thank you. I think I've learned a lot, because what this has done for me personally is it's got me in touch with farmers and fishermen and people who are every day making their life's purpose to produce a quality product. Our farmers have taught me so much. It's just really a privilege to see the reverence they have for their fields and for their crops. And in fact, one of our lead farmers, Tor, who's been an organic farmer for over 30 years, said, Jeff, I love growing tartary buckwheat. I love when it goes into bloom. The field smells so good. I like walking through, seeing the plants. And I can see his reverence for what he's doing. And, we have these, I have a partner who is, we built a very unique fish oil producing company out in Dutch Harbor, Alaska, in the Aleutian Islands. It's actually the first pharmaceutical grade plant in all of Alaska that produces, and we have our own boats and we have our own fisher people, and they come in with the fish that are from live fish into minus 20 degree frozen in 15 minutes, and they come to our plant and they never get above 100 degrees Fahrenheit in processing. And that produces a kind of fish oil that has never been produced before. It retains the specialized pro-resolving mediators. And these used to be thrown away as waste products. And now we are using them, and we got a grant from the state of Alaska to hire young Alaskan men and women to be trained as techs and we built a food service and a living quarters, and now we are involved with the fishing industry, and we are RFM, Responsible Fish Management approved, and MSC approved. So both for the concept of seeing the people that are engaged with the stewardship of Alaska has no fish farming, so it's all wild caught fish, and then to see what the farmers are doing, it really teaches me what life is all about, where it really starts. And it's a system that everyone is engaged in to create a different outcome, which is focused on health and preservation and sustainability, and not just rape and plunder.
Yeah, you get to see it from the beginning all the way to the product. And it's just beautiful to hear. I've been to Alaska a few times, and it's mind-blowing. I feel like life still really exists in its original form in Alaska.
Yeah.
And to be able to be there and feel it, you really do feel it.
Yes.
And it's such a beautiful thing. And I'm going to come up and visit you one of these days.
I hope you will. I hope you will. You know, my wife and I have 35,000 miles together on our boat in Alaska.
Oh, wow.
So we've done many, many, many trips from Seattle to Alaska on our boat and spent time in the little villages. And, of course, now on the Aleutian Islands, we get up there to our facility in Dutch Harbor. But, yeah, it's a life experience. I'd love to share it with you.
I'm going to make it a point to come up there.
Good.
Well, Dr. Bland, this has been a true pleasure. I have so much more I want to talk to you about and ask you about, so I'm going to definitely invite you back.
Well,
and
thank you.
Can't wait to have another conversation one of these days. Where can people find more about the products and learn more from you?
Yeah, so bigboldhealth.com, simple, for our products. And again, I really want to talk about the sprout powder because I think this particular material is, 2 teaspoons a day. But
I'm going to steal that bag from you.
Yeah, that's yours.
Right.
And if they want to know more about from kind of the geeky stuff that's a health professional, you can go to jeffreybland.com. That's Jeffrey Bland.com. Or if they want to see what we're doing in the professional education side, they can go to Personalized Lifestyle Medicine, so plmi.org. So you'll find me, and I would encourage maybe if people are interested, I have a virtual clone now. I took every bit of information that I've ever either produced, written about, my books, everything. It's just converted into a couple of terabytes of data. So you can talk to Jeff Bland now on the jeffreybland.com website. You can ask him a question. And this actually freaks out my family because it actually is my voice print. It's an amazing duplication. And the Jeff Bland clone remembers better than I do. It remembers everything that I've ever done or written. So you can ask a question and see what Jeff tells you.
Oh, my gosh. I can't wait to talk to jeffbland.com.
It's crazy.
That's fantastic. Well, once again, thank you so much. It was a deep honor of mine to have you on the podcast.
It's my honor. Thank you, Dr. Shah. Really extraordinary conversation.
Thank you.